Hi, Mike Pierce here, better known as Antarctic Mike. Let me give you a practical example of an application in the real world from one of the points from my signature program, Leading at 90 Below Zero. The program up to this point has really been about the endurance expedition of 1914, which was led by a guy named Ernest Shackleton. And this is the whole reason why I went to the Antarctic twice in the year 2006 to run a marathon and then an ultramarathon. It really had nothing to do with running. It was really about following in the footsteps of my heroes. So of course you get back from a marathon and you get one of these things, which is a medal. That's normally what you get for your entry fee, right? You get a medal, a t-shirt, and a beer. Now of course when you get one of these medals, the normal knee-jerk reaction that most people get, whether they run a marathon or a triathlon or 10K, is, how'd you do? Meaning, what was your time? So of course I get back from Antarctica and one of my buddies says to me, wow, that's pretty cool, Mike. What was your time? I looked at him and I'm like, my time? I said, you realize I went halfway to the moon to run this thing. I lived in a commercial freezer for a year. I mean, I really didn't care about time. But then I said, look, I'm going to let you off the hook. Because the truth of the matter is, I didn't go down to run for time. That was never important to me. But I wasn't the only runner there. You see, there were 8 other people. We had 9 in the field. 2 of the 9 came for one purpose, and that was to win the race, regardless of whether their time was an hour or 4 hours or 4 days. They didn't care about time, as long as they won. Now we had 2 others who came for a particular time. Whether it was they finished first, they finished in the middle, they finished last, they didn't care. It was about a time. We had another lady who came not for either, but rather her goal was to be the first woman in the world to run a marathon on all 7 continents. A 59-year-old lady from Wales, and she did it. Then, of course, you had Antarctic Mike, or what they call the freezer guy. He didn't come for a time, he didn't come to win, and he didn't come for 7 continents. Remember, I came to follow in the footsteps of my heroes. And so really what we have here is we have everybody with a different definition of a gold medal. And I thought to myself, well, wait a minute, let's transpose this thought process into the real world where it really counts, into your world. We can have 5 people all on the same team, whether they're administrative people, they could be operations folks, they could be salespeople. It doesn't matter if they're entry level, they could be C-level, it's immaterial. The point is we have 5 people on the same team, and let's make the assumption that they're all running to the same destination point, i.e. the same 26.2 mile mark, which is the marathon. The reasons as to why each of those people on your team are running that race vary as much as the different definitions and the different reasons as to why all the runners in Antarctica were running to the 26 mile mark or the 100-kilometer mark, whichever race it was. And so I thought to myself, you realize everybody has a different definition of a gold medal. Let me give you another example of how this really plays out in the real world. This is an example of a medal that I created for FedEx. They're one of my customers. And on this medal, I know you may not be able to read it, but it says, the Purple Promise Ultramarathon. If you Google Purple Promise and Fred Smith, you're going to find something very interesting. It's a creed that he started when he began the company back in the 70s. The Purple Promise basically was a vow that Fred really had every employee make as they joined the FedEx team. And the vow was that they committed to making what he calls every FedEx experience outstanding. Experience meaning an interchange between 2 employees or between an employee and maybe a customer. The point is that it's a very important creed that really FedEx runs on even to this day. So I made these medals, right? And it says the FedEx Purple Promise Ultramarathon. And on the back, it says people, service, and profits, because these are the 3 legs of the FedEx stool. Now, I gave these medals out in a speaking engagement I did for FedEx a few years back. And I had one of the gals stand up. And I said to her, why are you running the Purple Promise Ultramarathon? She's an 18-year veteran of FedEx. And of course, at first, she's saying things like, well, it's a great company, and they've got great training and great benefits, which is all true. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I said to her, let's get a little bit deeper, and let's really understand your why. You see, that's what this really represents. This is the why. And this is really important for people to understand. Well, after a little bit of coaching and a little bit of time, she said, let me tell you what I really want. I want to save enough money so that someday I can buy a horse farm. And the reason I want to buy a horse farm is to be able to provide kids who have autism rides on horses. Because that, to me, is how I can really use my talents, make an impact, and make a difference in people's lives. And I thought to myself, that is her definition of her gold medal. Now, if you're a leader and you're a manager and you're leading this gal, you see, it's very important to know that about her, because I will tell you, metaphorically speaking, in the first mile or two of the race, she'll run for any reason, as most employees will run. They've got momentum, they've got a job, they've got bills to pay. That's like the first few miles of the race. But I will tell you that when you're 15 or 20 miles into the marathon, and now all of a sudden the hill gets steeper, the weather gets worse, the wind starts picking up, people are not going to run for the company's definition of a gold medal. They're not going to run for your definition. And they're not going to run for the definition of their gold medal that you think they have. They're only going to run for the definition of the medal that's most important to them. That's why, as a leader, as a manager, as somebody really responsible for helping that person be engaged and be their best, you've got to know how they define that gold medal and manage them partially to that definition. You see, if you were my coach in running and you were preparing me to go to Antarctica, and your whole goal in mind was to get me to win the race or to run faster, and you didn't know my fascination with polar history, and you didn't know my definition of my medal, which was to really follow in the footsteps of my heroes, even if you got me to win the race, you wouldn't be a very good coach for me, because you haven't really coached me and led me based on my definition of the medal, but rather you did so based on a definition of either your medal or the one that you thought I had. That's why it's so critical to really understand the why, not just the what and not just the how. So that's one example of a practical application from my program, Leading at 90 Below Zero. Thank you for your time.